So welcome to lesson 6. In this lesson, we're going to expand on our simple little JSON server and add some web server-like functionality to it and generally make it more powerful and functioning. And over the course of this lesson, we'll let you sort of view some pages with it. The first thing I want to do, though, to sort of get us started with some of this functionality is to talk a little bit more about streams in Node.js. We briefly came up with this concept in lesson 4 when we looked at post data, and we found out that the HTTP request object was a stream and that the data coming in on it had these sort of stream-like functionality. I'd like to actually sort of talk about this a bit more and look at this in a little more detail so we're sure that we're really comfortable with what we're doing on with these objects and everything. So streams are a very, very powerful and sort of core concept in Node.js. You'll find a lot of stuff works with streams, and in addition, a lot of people writing modules expose their functionality through streams. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at some of that file code we've written before to read in the contents of a file, but instead we're going to do it using streams. So I'm going to still need the file system module here, like we've always done when we work with files. But instead, I'm going to use streams to do it. So the way you do it let's do a function load file contents like that. And it'll take a path, and then it will, let's call it a file name like that, and then it'll take a callback. Now, to do this with streams, I'm going to create something called a read stream, and that is done by the create read stream function, and you give it the file name that you want to read. Now, like you saw before, the key pattern I'm going to use is on event name callback, or a function, something like that. This is sort of the key pattern you're going to be using when you work with streams, and indeed any event emitter in Node.js. Streams are actually a subclass of this event class. So I'm going to use this rs on event name sort of pattern. And for streams, for read streams, the key event we're going to be looking for is the readable event. And then we give it a function. And the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to call a read function on this stream. Once we get that, we're going to say if d is a string. We also want to sort of get our var file contents equals quote quote. If type of d equals string, then this is easy. File contents plus equals d. Let's do it this way just to be safe. Else, if d is an object, and indeed it is a buffer, then all we have to do is file contents plus equals d.toString utf-8. Like that. Now you remember in previous lessons we've maybe said 0 bytes read or something like that for when we use the fs.read function, but here we don't do that. And the reason for that is when we do the data.read, we get a buffer that is sized exactly to the data it has. So the d.toString will just convert the whole buffer to a string. Sometimes there will be no data or something. So if we have data, then we'll do that. Otherwise, we can just continue to wait. So that is the basics of the readable function in that pattern. And then the other event we want to wait for is the end event, like this. And then that takes a function as well to call. Oopsie. And what it will do is we'll just say console dot let's say callback null file contents like that. Now we can say load file contents test.text, and we'll go function results if console log else console log results. And then that should be all there is to it. And that's the call to load file contents. So our core pattern again is create the read stream. When we get the readable event, call a function that immediately reads whatever is available from that stream, manipulates it and does whatever we want with it. When we get an end event, then we're done, and we can do the callback, and we can just do whatever post-processing we want. And if we've typed this all in correctly, we should be able to say node stream for test.txt. And there we go. There's our big, nice, long text file that we were working with before. So this is all great and everything, but what happens if we actually want to call text.xls or text.doc or something like that? Let's see what happens then. Well, now we'll get an error. So the way we can handle that functionality is we can actually add a handler for another event on the read stream called error, like this. And then that actually takes a function with an error object, and then we can just say callback error. You know, we can do whatever we want to handle that error, but that is the basics of working with errors. And then we'll see here our function we'll get the error object, and then we'll print that out. So let's try that again. See, now we'll correctly catch the error, and then we'll call it back to our callback, who will then turn around and print it out for us and everything. So that is the basics of working with streams. I wanted to quickly show you, this is the new way of working with streams, and this was introduced in Node 0.9, which is a sort of beta unstable release, and Node 0.10, which is the new latest stable release of Node. In the olden days, which was like a couple months ago, there was no readable event. There was indeed an event called data, and the data were passed directly to the function. And then there was still the end and the error pattern as before. This caused some problems with timings and potentially missed events and everything, so they decided to switch to the new readable model. If you see any code that uses this data, don't be surprised. It's just code that hasn't been updated to the new Streams module, and theoretically it should be compatible with the new version of Node. There have been a few bumps in the road and everything, but we from now on we'll be working with the 0.10 series, so we will always be working with the readable event and doing the explicit reads ourselves. So that's the basics of working with streams. We'll see a few more things in a minute. I wanted to take a very quick moment and talk about buffers, because we've used them a lot, but we haven't talked too much about them. So let's create a new file here called buffer.js. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a simple buffer with 10,000 bytes, and I'm going to create a string, and then I'm going to say b.write s. Now, I want to see how big my buffer is right now, so I'm going to say b.length. Okay? And now, when I say node buffer, I get 10,000. The length field on the buffer object does not return the length of the data in the buffer. It returns the size of the buffer itself. If you want to, a buffer is just a binary blob storage space to put things in, and if you want to work with subchunks or subsections of it, it's up to you to remember where those are and sort of remember where the start and end of your data are. There is one other trick I wanted to show you, and something we'll run into occasionally, and that is if you use multi-byte Unicode characters. So for example, if I want to type my name in Chinese, Wojiao Wang Ma Ke, that just says my name is Mark in Chinese. I'll write that into the buffer, and then I want to show the string.length, and then I also want to show you a new function called which is a sort of class function called buffer.byteLength, which will show you how many actual bytes of storage that string is taking up. So now if I run the node buffer again, you'll see 5 and 15. So there are, in fact, 5 characters in this string, the 5 Chinese characters, and that's what the S length returns. But if you actually look at the storage space that is taken up in memory, you'll see the buffer byte length tells us that that is indeed 15. So I just wanted to make sure you're comfortable with the buffers. There's one other function you'll maybe use on a semi-regular basis, and that is the concat function, which you give it a buffer, and then it concat like that, and then it adds the contents of that buffer to the current buffer. So that's a sort of basic introduction to streams and buffers and working with sort of string data and versus Unicode data. Be a little careful with that. And in the next part, we'll go ahead and look at serving static files.